So welcome back to another episode, and yes, this is a story that I've never told on the channel in 15 years, and I can't believe that I haven't, because this story explains, unfortunately, why I am the way that I am, and why I'm so obsessed with movies, why I'm so obsessed with art and books and all that kind of stuff. There's a huge reason, and it's only been the last few years that I've thought about it, that I'm like, it's all because of this story that happened in the very early 80s, like 1980, 81, 82, 83. And it's to do with my dad and the job that he had. And I've never talked about this, and I think it's so crazy, and I think a lot of you will find it fascinating because it's a look to the past on what the internet was before there was an internet and how lucky I was to have this experience. It's really something else. So let's go back to 1980, and we lived in England. My family lived in England, and my dad was like, you know what, I want to move over to Ontario, Toronto, to be closer to family in Canada. And so that was a really big move. Our entire family moved from England to Ontario, Canada. Very strange stuff, you know, British kids, British family coming over here, so big accent thing and all of that. And my dad was a big manager of supermarkets in England. And of course, at that time, it was like 6 or 7 years old, so I didn't really know what any of that really meant. But so we came to Canada, and my dad got an incredible job. When I look back on it now, it's legendary, and there's a lot to this story, and you won't believe some of the bits in it. It's kind of crazy that are to come with it all. So my dad got this amazing job as manager of the world's biggest bookstore. Yes, this was a thing. This store was a big thing in Toronto, downtown Toronto, for years. Unfortunately, you know, in the last bunch of years, it's closed down, and they've turned it into, like, I don't even know, apartment buildings or something like that. But in the 80s, this was the be-all, end-all, biggest bookstore in the entire world. So this is before the internet. So if you wanted to find out anything about history or anything like that, you would go to the world's biggest bookstore and go to a certain section and find a book on that particular thing. That's how you did it. You got books on it. And that's what's so extraordinary. So I didn't realize how lucky I was. I was 7 years old, and my dad, nearly every Saturday, because he worked Saturdays, he would take me downtown Toronto to the world's biggest bookstore. And I got so many memories of being in the car with him as a little kid, listening to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio play on the radio, going down to the store. And as a little kid, this place was a wonder for me. It was like something unbelievable that I remember. We walked through the front door, and my dad would turn to this huge security guard working the doors there, and he'd say, hey, you, to the security guard, don't let this kid leave. Don't let this kid leave. And the security guard's like, yeah, no problem. Because I didn't realize the scope that my dad was manager of the store. So everybody was very nice to my dad who worked there. And so therefore they were very nice to me. So I had an amazing experience at this store. And so my dad would go off to manage for the day, and I had the entire run of the entire bookstore. I could go anywhere and just sit down and read for 8 hours, up to 8 hours. And then I meet my dad at lunch. I'll get to the pictures like that in a bit. But here's the thing. I would go into this store, and I'd be like, I'm going down to the science fiction fantasy section. This is 1981, 82, 83 that I went to this store. And I would go down, and there'd be nobody in the section, and there would be all these graphic novels of things like this. I bought this from back then. Look at this. Alien. Right here. Isn't this absolute? I don't know why I was a kid, I wrote $1.75 on there. I don't know why I decided to do that. But yeah, like things like this, the illustrated story of Alien. This is what I got from the bookstore back then. This is what my dad, bought me at the end of the day. I was like, oh my God, I have to get this book. But I'd sit and I would just read all day and flip through art books. Really amazing fantasy sci-fi art books, especially in the early 80s. There was a ton load of them. Really great artists too. And I'd sit there for hours just poring over this stuff. And I think that had a massive effect on me. It made me appreciate art and books in a way that's almost beyond, because I just sit there in this weird trance, picking up any books that I want, sitting down on the floor and just reading them, and nobody would bother me because I was the manager's son, right? And I cannot tell you or stress to you the size of this bookstore. It wasn't just one level, it was 2 levels, and every section was gigantic, massive in scope. I mean, it was a real wonder place. And then I'd wander over to the children's section, and there'd be a couple of people working over there. And they're like, "Oh, hi, John, how you doing?" Everybody was so nice to me. It was wonderful stuff. And then that's when I would go over there and I'd find out about Tintin, and I'd get all the Tintin books, and I'd sit and read all the Tintin books. So every time I went there, I was just pouring in all of this stuff. And I can't stress enough, the internet didn't exist. So this was my internet. This is where I was getting all of my information from for science fiction, everything. And I started to read and learn about everything of the old 1940s, 50s, 60s science fiction movies that led me up to the 80s into Star Wars. And you have to understand, I was just coming off seeing Star Wars in the theater in 1977. So, and then obviously Empire Strikes Back in 81 when it came to Ontario. I saw that. So there was so much Star Wars stuff in there, and I was just like eating it up for breakfast. So that was really amazing. I also have really great memories of my dad taking me down. I swear to God, it was underneath a bit, another level where there'd be a bunch of guys, younger guys in their teens, stocking books and, shipping them out, shipping them in, stuff like that, doing the grunt work. And that's the kind of work that I did for many, many years, doing that kind of stuff. And they were really great guys. And my dad would go down there and he'd say, hey, what are you doing, to one of the younger guys, like he's 18. And he's like, "Oh, I'm just, doing books here." He's like, "Here, take my son out for lunch. Here's money for you and him, and take him to an arcade and go have some fun." And I remember that. And so the younger guy was like, I get to go and play arcade games and have lunch for like a long time. So yeah, I remember going out with some of the younger guys. I was really young, but they were like 18, and they were really great people. I'll never forget that. And they would take me to arcades downtown Toronto. I played Tron, all the old school games. We'd go for lunch, a hamburger and stuff like that. And then we come back to the store. And so a lot of great memories being at the store. But here's the interesting stuff that I wanted to get into. Some really, really fascinating stuff. And now that I look back on it, I'm kind of in awe of it. So at the store, my dad, as I say, was the manager. But they would always get authors coming in to do signings, which is a big thing now. It was a really big thing back then. So they would have authors like Stephen King come in. Now, I wasn't there when Stephen King came in, but my dad was, and my dad set him up for the day so he can do his signings and all that. And then here's the thing. My dad went for dinner with Stephen King. It was part of the thing of being a manager, that you look after the guests, the authors, when they would come, and you take them out for dinner and stuff like that. So, so for me, my dad, I gotta say this, he was not a fanboy. He was a very old school guy in a lot of ways. And I'd say to my dad, I'm like, "Oh my God, you had dinner with Stephen King? What was that like? What was he like?" And my dad would just say this. He goes, "Oh God, he's a weirdo. He was a weirdo." And that was it. That's all I got. And unfortunately, my dad's been passed away for 25 years. I would love to ask him a lot of different stories about all of the authors that came in. He had Frank Herbert come in. Frank Herbert of Dune back then come in, and he hung out with him. I remember we got like some framed pictures of Dune back then and stuff like that. Like, we're talking like the early 80s, 1981, 82, unbelievable stuff. And Robert Bateman, the great painter, came in and stuff like that. Tons of guests. I remember even Jim Davis, who created Garfield. I remember my dad hanging out with him and getting me all the books signed. And Garfield was a big thing in the 80s. It really, really was. So, it's crazy to look back on that store and how lucky I was as a young guy having the privilege to go to the world's biggest bookstore and just be able to do whatever I wanted there and hang out for as long as I wanted. And I think that's really what made me become who I am, because Star Wars really changed me when I saw that in 77. I was just like, that blew me away. I loved everything science fiction after that. And I think going to the world's biggest bookstore showed me all of these amazing books and artwork and novels and ideas and imagination. And I ate it up for breakfast. I ate it up for breakfast, and I loved every single second of it. And I have so many fond memories of spending Saturdays there. And, I even remember when the movie E.T. opened up, and there was a certain section of the store that was dedicated to E.T. at the front. Really wild stuff. I mean, entire sections of heavy metal magazine, like it was a sci-fi fantasy magazine. And you had to be 18 or older to be reading it. I just went down there at 7, 8 years old and just went through it because I like sci-fi. I wanted it all. I wanted anything and everything, and I didn't care if it was like a little too intense for me because blood and guts or anything like that. I wanted it all. I wanted it all, and I think it served me well. And do you know what? It's been the last few years, and I've just gone, that's what made me who I am. And it's funny, in 15 years of the show, I never mentioned that I went to this place, or that what my dad's job was there. And my dad was only manager there from 81 to 83, because in 84 we moved to Vancouver, and then he got a job at a framing company. I mean, he became a manager at a framing company, which was not as fun as manager of the world's biggest bookstore. Yeah, when I look back at like 1982, I remember going to the store. I'd hang out there all day, and then my dad would be like, "Hey, you want to go see Blade Runner?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And we go to the theater downtown Toronto, and I saw Blade Runner when I was 8 years old, downtown Toronto, and from leaving the world's biggest bookstore. What a memory! What a memory, and what a time! And I really wanted to come in and tell this story because my dad has been passed away for 25 years. The store is gone now, and there was no video back then. People weren't bringing around cameras and filming a lot of that. So a lot of this stuff is just in memory. And it was one that I really, really wanted to record for myself as well. And I dug up a whole bunch of pictures of my dad at that store at that time. And anyways, I hope you guys kind of enjoyed the story and went back on a little bit of a look back into the history of the internet. Before the internet, it was this world's biggest bookstore, the ultimate place to get all your information about anything. And I had the key to the door, and I'll always be very thankful for my father taking me there and letting me have full range of the entire store, full run of the entire store, to go where I wanted and to look at every single book that I ever wanted. And let me tell you, in that store, it was massive. I looked at every single book I could have ever dreamed of, and it was really magical. It's even magical to this day thinking back. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story. So anyways, guys, until next time.